Hello and welcome. Ukraine as well as Russia can claim some successes on the battlefield, but the bigger news is the massive amount of weaponry that Ukraine will receive in the future, as well as steps towards Western fighter jets. This and more in this situational report. We'll start in the north, or at first at the overall situation. Ukraine is reporting additional air attacks. They say they shot down 26 of 28 Shahed that were used against them. This time it seems the Russians targeted Odessa, the harbor installations there, probably to diminish Ukraine's possibilities, Ukraine's abilities to export grain. On the eastern front, the Russians have reached Torske. With their advances, they have now entered the outskirts roughly down here. We have a video showing shelling there, which is then geolocalized at this very point. As you can see, it's well within the outer parts of the town. This is somewhat important, as Torske is a transport hub in the southern part of the Luhansk front north of the Seversky Donetsk. Should they lose Sarishne and Torske, they will likely not be able to fully supply the whole southern area towards Yampil and the Serebryanske forest at the same time. I mean, they surely can bring over some with small crafts, but the bigger supply will be missing, so it seems likely that they will lose additional ground here in the Serebryanske forest. The Russians are also claiming that they had successes, additional successes in that forest. They claim over 10 Ukrainian positions were taken. I don't see any proof of this. It might be true, it might not be true, but the Ukrainians are saying they're currently on the defensive there and fighting back Russian attacks. So at least when it comes to the overall initiative, both sides are in agreement. Further south of the Seversky Donetsk, we have reports about Russian attacks at Orikhovo, Vasilivka, and Hirurivka. So here and here the Russians were attacking. They were not successful in this regard. Fighting is continuing around Berkhivka. The Russians are saying yesterday they repulsed Ukrainian positions. They pushed the Ukrainians back, but now the Ukrainians have retaken those positions. So basically more or less a stalemate happening there as well. The more interesting part is what is happening obviously at Klishchivka. First, we have War Gonzo here saying that the Ukrainian forces gained 1.5 kilometers south of Rostolivka. So somewhere here they must have advanced recently, and that they are the fighting is continuing around Klishchivka, and that they gained some ground northwest of it. Where exactly, we obviously don't know. It might be this ridgeline. This would obviously be extremely important as it is dominating the whole area. Voenkor is also reporting about this very freshly, and they are saying that the Ukrainians likely entered the town already. When we see the map here, you see that even according to them, they have reached probably at this point the town. What they do show is a video of artillery shelling inside of the town, but this is the, I think, 58th Ukrainian mechanized brigade. So this is not a sign of Ukrainians being inside of it, just of Ukrainians shelling it. It's unclear, but it seems like the Ukrainians have had some advances, and if they actually entered the town, then it would be expected that the front lines on both sides should collapse fairly soon, with now the ridgeline being pierced, but we'll have to observe this and see how it continues. Further south, fighting at Avdiivka, Pervomaiske, Avdiivka here, Pervomaiske, Nevelske, Marinka, and Pobieda. No changes to be reported here. I cannot say that anything has changed. Further west on the oblast border between Donetsk here and Zaporizhzhia here, we have reports of further Ukrainian attacks, and War Gonzo is reporting additional successes. You see here, advancing from the west and north to Priutne. This is here. So according to them, they somewhat are advancing in this degree. I do not find any proof of how far or how much they have advanced, but it seems like there's still some kind of movement in the Ukrainian offensive activity at this point. Further west, south of Orikhiv, we have fresh pictures from the Bradley parking lot, showing us Ukrainian soldiers seem to be firmly in control now. This is also interesting because it shows us the situation of the vehicles. You can clearly see fire damage here, even though the interior seems to be more or less untouched. At least it looks like this. Here you see pure carnage. These are complete wreckage. That's a Brem 1, which shows obvious fire marks as well. This one, on the other hand, looks fairly well. We see fire damage here, no fire damage there. This is the Leopard 2A6, and it doesn't show any fire damage, but obviously there's always a possibility that it took fire from the other side. So when I look at the pictures, I think there might be a chance for the Ukrainians to salvage maybe the Leopard 2A6 and 2 or 3 Bradleys. Several of them are definitely fully destroyed. We don't know the situation inside the Leopard, but we see it here from the other side as well, and it seems to be more or less fine. The Russians seem to have missed their opportunity to destroy them when they weren't able to salvage them themselves, and now the Ukrainians seem to have the chance. It's far from proven yet. The Ukrainian forces will still have to bring in recovery vehicles if those pictures aren't old enough that this is already done. But according to this, they should be able to salvage it. This was roughly here. And we've seen a couple of days ago Ukrainian salvage operations up here. So it should be possible, quite possible, and we should see at least those that are somewhat repairable soon to enter repair workshops to be refurbished and be put back into service. The Russians have had some successes too. This should be south of Robotine. Here they are posing, and this is a fresh video, at least they claim it's fresh, posing in front of a captured Bradley. But then again, it just shows them in front of one. That doesn't mean they have salvaged it yet, even though that has to be openly said. This is just a matter of time until they will present us with a Leopard 2 or with a Bradley or with a Marder or any other of the Western equipment. At some point they will fall into Russian hands. Whether still operational or just as wrecks is basically close to unavoidable. In the Vasilivka area, west of this, we have reports about about Ukrainian massive attacks here, Lobkove, Piatikhatki, in that area. This is being reported by Riba. Riba, the pro-Russian channel, is saying who attacked, and they are claiming that the attack was repulsed and they suffered grave losses. Which we cannot confirm at this point, but at least according to them, it shows that these attacks have been successful. Riba have not been successful. Riba is also claiming that the Russians did a counterattack here north of Robotine and managed to push back the Ukrainians significantly. Again, so far we only have the pro-Russian channels claiming this, no proof of it whatsoever. We don't know the extent of the claimed successes. I haven't seen any picture proving this, even though it's likely that this video was taken in connection with this. But as of now, we don't know if this attack, how far this attack has been successful. But this is unfortunately incomplete information as of now, which we'll have to talk about in the coming days. Further west on the Dnipro front line, no change in territory there. It seems like the Russians have withdrawn from that area to a certain degree and don't actively try to push the Ukrainians back over the river. So the bridgehead, which is roughly in this area here, is holding. Supposedly the Ukrainians also brought some troops over here on this island, 2 days ago, but as of now there seems to have the fighting on the ground seems to have died down to a certain degree, and the Russians are focusing on artillery and glide bombs to strike those points. This kind of makes sense, as the Ukrainians have the high ground here and can easily strike the advances from Russian forces into the bridgehead. So in this regard, it makes no sense for them to lose man after man and personnel and material in attacks on a position that is not a serious danger as of yet. As while this can be called a bridgehead, there's still a sizable river of over 100 meters in width in between, and they have it would be a massive surprise if they hadn't rigged this bridge for explosion. So in worst case, the Ukrainians might settle down here permanently, but they are far away from being able to push forward into Leshki. Whether it's worth losing personnel over this can seriously be doubted, and the Russians seem to have come to that conclusion. Overall, we have a report of a Russian attack on Snake Island with drones and aircraft, a supposedly heavy attack. There are pictures of smoke plumes starting from it. The Ukrainian side is saying this is likely a demonstration in a way in regards to the grain agreement, that the Russians are able to strike in this region to basically send a sign to the Turks and to the Ukrainians that anything that's going on here has to be done under the eyes of the Russian military, and that is still able to strike in this region. The deputy commander of the Russian Southern Military District, Lieutenant General Oleg Tsokov, was killed in Berdyansk in a storm shadow strike on a hotel that he was using as a headquarter. It's unclear how many other Russian officers have died. There are some rumors that it might have been during a staff meeting, which would include which would lead us to assume that several other high officers have fallen. He's obviously another high Russian general having been taken out, and again one that is being considered fairly competent, veteran of both Chechen wars and of Syria before. He was being considered to be one of the brighter Russian generals. And we have here a report. This is a pro-Wagner channel, if I recall correctly. I'm not too sure about how accurate it is. So we need to take the information with a little bit of hesitation. We always have to take information with a little bit of hesitation and grain of salt, but I cannot say that this channel is known to me as one of the more solid ones, even though they claim to have insider news a lot of the time. And here they are now claiming that Gerasimov has basically taken Major General Ivan Popov and taken his job. Fired him. He was the commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army, and supposedly he was sent forward, so I guess to the front line. The reason for that was that Popov said in Western Zaporizhzhia, so I guess here or here, but probably here, the units need a troop rotation that is urgently needed. And he, after Gerasimov declined, he said that he's going to go to Putin to talk to him personally. And according to the information here from this Russian Telegram channel, he was fired for alarmism and for trying to blackmail Gerasimov. If this is true, and we need to emphasize the if here, if this is true, then it would be another sign of Russia being basically having run out of reserves. It's basic knowledge inside of military that you need to rotate troops in and out. You can't fight 100% over months. It's impossible. You need rest and recuperation. Every military understands that normally, but you obviously have to have reserves to send in instead of the guys you take out of the front line. If Gerasimov is refusing it, and Gerasimov should know that troop rotations are necessary now and then, if Gerasimov is refusing this, then it would be an indication that Russia basically has barely any reserves left that can take the place of those units that have been in the front line. This would be a good sign for Ukraine, but then again, we need to take it with a lot of grains of salt, whether or not this is actually true. Partisan activity has also been reported, or I don't know if we can call it partisan activity, but it's in that direction. Captain Stanislav Rshitsky, I think, was killed when he was jogging in Krasnodar. He was the commander of the ship Krasnodar of the submarine that was used to strike Ukraine with Caliber missiles. Now he was the deputy head of mobilization in Krasnodar. The interesting thing is that he was posting his jogging runs on Strava, and there is a joke going around that one of those who said good job was Budanov, supposedly Budanov doing this, telling good job having done that jogging run. This seems highly unlikely. I think there are now pictures that, according to this, is Photoshop. Obviously, it's extremely unlikely that Budanov has an account and then an account that only is following one to do that. But it was an amusing idea of this, and it seems that that Rishitsky was basically posting where he would be, and thus was killed. He was killed supposedly by Serhiy Denisenko, who has already admitted it to the Russians. We don't know how much pressure was put up against him, whether he was tortured or anything like this, but the media, the Russian bloggers are claiming that he admitted that he did it. And the interesting part is that he was here in an event at Bucha in 2022 to commemorate those losses. He was openly there and still was able to enter Russia through open borders with some other country to do his attack on Rishitsky. Whether or not that's true, obviously we don't know, but as of now the Russians are claiming he was the one who killed Rishitsky. When it comes to troop generation, we have some claims by Shoigu. According to him, since March 2022, the production of military material has massively increased. To a certain degree, that would be expected, unless the sanctions actually cripple Russia. And it seems right now that through Kazakhstan, Georgia, and through China, Russia is more or less continuing to get most of what they need, at least something in to replace it with. At least those seem to be the indications. Nevertheless, he claims that the production of Orlan 10 and Orlan 30 reconnaissance drones has increased by 53 times since the beginning of the war. That kind of makes sense because they're fairly small and fairly simple, and you don't need a huge production when you don't lose them all the time outside of a war. But as they're easy to produce, that you would increase and that you would be able to increase the production makes kind of sense. More interesting is that he claims the T-72 and T-90 production has increased by 3.6 times. The Mi-28 production, that's an attack helicopter, is 3 times as high now. The Kamov 52 production is twice as high, and ammunition is 10 times as high. We have no clue how close these estimates are to reality. We know that Shoigu, the losses he claimed that the Ukrainians have suffered so far in the counteroffensive are absurd, to say it mildly. It seems likely that he's exaggerating those numbers massively, but at least this is what he's telling us, and I don't feel competent enough to really judge it. No, this is not the case. This is the case. This is the actual production number. You will have heard the numbers that supposedly right now they're producing new T-90s 20 a month. That is not 3.6 times the former production, but again, to a certain degree, we might not know the reality, but that's at least what Shoigu was telling us. The British Ministry of Defense is now also saying more about troop generation. According to them, the offices of the administration of Moscow are withdrawing orders for construction sites if the companies have not fulfilled the quota of volunteers for the Russian military. I talked about it in the past, that the Russians have seemingly put big companies under pressure to send a certain amount of their staff to fight in Ukraine. That led some companies to actually start advertisement just to find people that they can hire and then directly send to the Ministry of Defense. And this would be another sign where they basically outsource their recruiting to companies, making the company owners liable to find somebody to send to war. Otherwise, they would lose the money of construction sites. And we have news from Voenkor. According to them, the handover of weaponry from Wagner to the Russian military is in full swing. More than 2,000 pieces of equipment were transferred, including hundreds of tanks. That is extremely unlikely. At most, hundreds of armored vehicles, tanks, IFVs, APCs, etc. At most. Grad and Uragan, so multiple launch rocket systems, air defense systems, self-propelled artillery, etc., etc. 2,500 tons of ammunition and 20,000 small arms. So according to this, Wagner had a sizable amount of ammunition and weaponry and is handing it over to the Russian Ministry of Defense right now. In the political sphere, we have the the Speaker of the Duma, Volodin, has now asked the parliament to prepare a law, if I understand it correctly. I think, like, I'm not sure if it's a law or if something other, but he basically asked the Duma to something that would allow setting up armor racks of tanks in front of embassies from the nations that have delivered those tanks towards Ukraine. Not much of a surprise here. As this was done in the West, it was obvious that Russia would do this themselves as well as soon as they have some racks. Not much surprise here in this regard. When it comes to international support, the training, now we have a coalition of 11 countries under the leadership of Denmark and Norway that have agreed to join the F-16 coalition for Ukraine. The training for the pilots will start in August, and the training there will be a training center in Romania, according to the Dutch Minister of Defense Kjasa Ollongren. It will not necessarily be limited to F-16. There might be other planes up for possible transfer to Ukraine. In the past, we talked about the Australian FA-18 that are supposedly in good shape and have enough hours left in their hulls, in their structure, to be used by Ukraine. So it seems that now finally the training for Ukrainian pilots will start, which should mean that towards the end of the year we might see the first Western jets being used in Ukraine, but we'll have to see how far this will actually going to turn out. South Korea is also sending more weaponry, more military equipment as of now. But again, South Korea is still sticking to non-lethal equipment, as they don't want to endanger their relationships to Russia and China. That could hurt South Korea a lot by handing over technology or weaponry to North Korea. This is likely the reason why South Korea doesn't put its full weight into the support of Ukraine, which they generally do support. And Germany has also offered and announced a big additional armor package, weapon package. Germany will send 2 additional starter units for Patriots, so not a full battery, but just 2 starters. They will send 40 additional Marder IFVs, 25 Leopard 1A5 MBTs, 5 Bergepanzer II, those are armored recovery vehicles, 20,000 155mm grenades, 5,000 155mm smoke grenades, as well as pioneering and reconnaissance equipment. France has announced the delivery of 50 Scalp AR missiles. Those are basically Storm Shadow, but they are somewhat different, as they can also be equipped, instead of a regular warhead, with the possibility to scatter AT and AP mines, so anti-tank and anti-personnel mines. But they also have Chris ammunition that is intended to crater runways, basically some charges that are being dropped in line to create as many craters into an airfield as possible to take it out and not allow jets to start. This can obviously be highly useful for Ukraine to diminish Russian ability to use their planes, at least if they identify at which airfields they are currently used. The Australians have announced an additional 30 Bushmaster APCs. Ukraine has already received 90. This will bring the number up to 120. Norway is sending another 2 command centers, from what I understand, as well as 2 additional starters for NASAMS, the air defense system, as well as spare parts for them. And we have Rochelle in Canada. They are handing over Senator APCs, and the number is actually impressive. According to them, at the end of the year, they will have handed over 1,000 of them. So far, they have already given Ukraine 550 of those. So they seem to have started full-scale production just for Ukraine, with payments from Western nations in this regard. This is it from me for now. We have gone through everything we know as of now. I hope you found this interesting. If so, then leave a thumbs up, please. Despite my voice not being the greatest today, but I'm being caught by the flu. So leave a comment for the algorithm, what you think about the current ongoing counteroffensive. Are you disappointed with the successes so far, or is it what you were expecting? And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.